Yoel, let's just give some context to where we're at. We're going to be talking money again today.
Yep.
Today the Reserve Bank is going to be meeting once again. We're all thinking our rents are rising, our mortgages are rising. Will the Reserve Bank give us another interest rate rise? There's concerns that people have with that. Cost of living pressures are under significant rising. People are under pressure financially. Our fuel prices, they seem to go up every time we go to the fuel pump, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. But give us your insights here. There's a big lot of things you can look at and lots of negatives that you can identify. How do these affect the believer, do you think? I mean, are they as important to focus on as other different dimensions?
Yeah, I know that the cost of living increases are real for a lot of people and are really difficult. But if we're able to zoom out a little bit from the market cycles of increasing interest rates or groceries, we are still in the wealthiest generation probably ever to have lived. And so I guess if we're able to zoom out, a lot of those factors are out of our control. We can't necessarily do anything about whether or not the Reserve Bank is going to increase rates or leave them as they are. But we can do something about our own money habits if we choose to live simply, build margin into our lives, these kind of things, to try and take us away from the hard edges of some of these external economic forces that can sometimes tip us over, cause a lot of stress in our minds.
So zooming out, getting a God's eye view on what's going on in the world. You're confident that he's the one who's in control, confident that he can keep his eye on the sparrow and in the lilies of the field, and in some sense here, if we're going to look to him, then that's going to alleviate a little bit of the fear and anxiety that comes along with what you're observing in the daily headlines.
Yeah, or even sometimes a developing worldview as well. Listeners that have travelled overseas and seen the different material standards of living of the people over there, it can sometimes reset our baseline into what we think is wealthy and what we think is hardship, perhaps give us a different perspective. As well as we try and navigate some of these money decisions.
So you can have a God's eye view of what's happening here in Australia, but zooming out just a little bit further, and you've got nations that even surround us. Some of those that we'd describe as developing nations, where poverty is a real day-to-day challenge, and you've got to find yourself in a context here where you might recognise that even though things might not be going extremely well for you, you're still sort of in the upper echelons of wealthy people on the face of the earth.
Yes. Yeah, I was speaking with a former missionary worker who had come back to Australia and was living on a very humble wage here. And he mentioned, that was a challenge with increased costs of living. But he said his friends in Kenya, they faced a different level. He was thinking about whether or not he buys a coffee or makes it at home. Well, they were facing the real possibility of not having to skip meals in that next week. They didn't know where their next meal was going to come from. And that really framed his perspective of, while compared to his neighbours in the city that he was living in, he may have felt not wealthy, but compared to the brothers and sisters that he knew in Kenya, he had a totally different perspective.
In a sense, what I can hear you reflecting here is that no matter where you are, you're on a faith walk. Even though you might feel as though you're a little wealthier here, if you put yourself in the context of where people might be in the developing world, we're still living by faith, need to keep a focus on what God is doing, on what his mission is, because a lot of people, even though they feel wealthy now, are still living pay packet to pay packet. Whereas people on the perhaps in different parts of the world in a developing nation, maybe looking meal to meal. But there's still a sense in which this is a walk of faith, isn't it?
Yeah, I think although we objectively are wealthy, perhaps compared to other people, that's not our emotional, that's not how we feel. That's not our lived reality here. And I think part of that is because we've been sucked into a consumeristic system that does everything it possibly can to make us feel inadequate and lacking and not full, not that we're not living our lives to our fullest. We don't have enough. And I think that can really destroy our joy and often take us away. It can suck the spiritual life out of us and can stop us living the lives that we're called to and following that and staying on that journey that you mentioned, Neil.
How do we make sense of the shiny new car and, the house with two cars on the driveway, maybe the bigger house than we've got right now and we're uncomfortable and we're not that happy with, or that holiday, which is the luxury high-end holiday. These sorts of things become a dream and an aspiration, and thoughts that wouldn't it be lovely to be able to do those things?
Yeah.
Are those things wrong, or are they something that the Christian, in particular, has a particular view about, or the way that we develop our view when we're looking at a scriptural foundation? How do you see those sorts of aspirations?
There's a entrepreneur from Canada who says a bit of out there statement. He says a salary is something that they give you to sell your dreams. Now, I don't believe that that's true, but I do believe that consumerism is something that they give us to give up on our calling, and it really can take us away. It can really stop us. It can get us focused on, hey, maybe I could get a slightly better consumer experience, with this upgrade, rather than, hey, perhaps I could redirect my heart to my brother and sister and somewhere else that actually I believe will give more joy. So, I think that just firstly understanding that we're set up to fail when it comes to money. There are powerful forces that are actively working against our joy, because if we're discontent and anxious, we make better consumers as we turn to products and services for our joy, rather than being content sometimes in small communities. And so there are little mini money habits that anybody can do to try and push back. Part of it, I've got tons of tips in the book, but cutting out luxury in your life, or even when you do it, sometimes the choice is, I could upgrade and fly with this sort of premium airline, or I could fly with this budget airline. And for a lot of people, it's just a choice of slightly more comfort or slightly less comfort. But if you were able to say, my budget airline is going to plus a well in to my Christian brothers and sisters in Uganda, suddenly that equation might look different in your heart, and you actually might feel more joy, feel more happiness with that other option. So some of it is just building in mini money habits where you can tangibly see, you make visible the joy that you're bringing to others on a transaction by transaction basis. I do this sometimes at Nando's, and I love to get a peri-peri chip sometimes with my classic wrap. But now and then I go without, and I transfer that to a separate God's economy account. And I'm not just saving money so I can build a bigger barn later. I know that, hey, I've chosen to downgrade for discipleship. And I want to invest that into somebody else's life. I want to pay it forward. And so that, despite missing out, I mean, that's a bitter pill to swallow, is, going without peri-peri chips. how dare you suggest something like that? But in my own experience, that kind of, when you get down to the transactional level, you can really change your emotional journey with money. Even a little thing that I do as well, heard from a reader in Melbourne, helped me with this. Every time I tap, I automatically round that up and add a couple of bucks to a separate account. And so every time I tap, I'm also giving. And that's casting a vote in my own mind that I'm not a consumer, I'm a disciple. Even though there's lots of votes that's getting cast that I am a consumer, people that I'm getting from the world around me.